everyone. I'm Tyler Cohen Wood, guest host for Cybercrime Magazine, and we are at the Global Cyber Innovation Summit in Baltimore, Maryland. Today, I'm here with Matt Dunlop for our Ask the CISO series sponsored by Fortinet. Matt, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
So you have such an interesting background. You have a great education. You went to many schools, and you were a math major.
I was.
Did you think that that was going to translate into the career that you have today?
Well, so actually, it's interesting. At the time I went to do my undergrad, I was extremely interested in computers, but my main objective was to join the military. And so at that time, computer science wasn't a fledgling field, and so they weren't really offering too many scholarships for computer science, and so it was math and engineering. So I went the math direction, and with the main objective of just being career military, and then throughout my time in the military, I was able to fortunately go back to what I was interested in and get advanced degrees in computer engineering and computer security, and kind of go full circle to what my original interests were.
Tell us a little bit about your experience at the U.S. Cyber Command.
I originally got into cyber in the early 2000s, probably about 2000, and in the Army I became a network engineer and did that for a good bit of time, and then had the opportunity to go to my first advanced degree in computer engineering at Carnegie Mellon, and with a follow-on to teach at West Point, teach computer science at West Point, which is a great opportunity. And that was before Army Cyber Command and Cyber Command stood up. And then following that, I had the opportunity to go back and do some PhD work with the intent to go back and teach again at West Point. And that was the time that Cyber Command was standing up. And so at the end of that, I had the opportunity to actually go help the Army Cyber Command stand up. And so, I moved that direction. It was actually a fascinating opportunity because it was being able to build it from the ground up and see it evolve over time.
That's really, really exciting to be able to do that. So then you went to Under Armour. What differences have you noticed between this wonderful career with Army Cyber Command and then this great career that you have now? I'm sure there's some differences, but some things are probably the same.
So sure. That's a question actually I get asked a lot.
I'm sure.
It's the comment, how is it going from federal to commercial? And there are differences, sure, of course, because one's military, one's not. But as far as the actual job goes, the technology is the same. The technology doesn't change. How you defend things is really consistent across multiple industries. It's really just what you're defending and the scope of what you're defending that changes. And so, what I learned in Army Cyber Command and U.S. Cyber Command really helped me to do a better job on the commercial space.
So you've been very involved in education, in teaching young people of today. And what would you recommend for them coming out of school? Because I'm sure that you've noticed it's very difficult sometimes for kids that are in a cyber program because there's so many different aspects to where they can go in cyber. They can go a forensics career, a networking career. There's so many different angles they can take. Is that something that your students have struggled with?
So this is actually kind of one of my soapbox areas. Is it? And so the next 25 minutes are going to be me talking about education. No, as we look in the future and we project this huge job shortage, companies are looking for the silver bullet, the thing that's going to help make somebody a cyber operator or a cybersecurity person. But I look at it as it's a long game, right? You have to educate students from the beginning. There's a number of programs out there, and one that I've been involved with that's starting to pick up momentum that I think is fantastic is the National Cyber Education Program, partnered with the Discovery Channel. And what it does is given that we don't have that many educators in the K through 12 arena, they use the Discovery Education as a platform to deliver content, and the teachers then become coaches and get better themselves. But the gist of it is, If we can teach kids from K about cyber, then not only do we help close that workforce gap because people learn more about it over the time through their educational career, but also they just become better users because they understand the pitfalls that a lot of our users fall into now. I mean, if you look across the board and at the statistics, there's statistics that say 95% of cyber attacks are user error. So if we can decrease that gap, that makes the CISO's job much, much easier. And so I'd really love to see at some point cyber become part of the core curriculum. Of course, the question I get when I say that is, well, where if it's becoming part of the curriculum, what leaves? Well, that's somebody else's problem to solve. But
recess,
right? Maybe. But you know, if you look at the topics that are part of the core curriculum, I think everyone would agree that every child touches technology, but there's nothing in the program to teach them how to use it safely. You know, so I think, like I said, it's part of a longer game. But to answer your original question, since I got off my soapbox, is what can they do now? Is I've actually had undergraduates come to me and say, you know, I'm really interested in cybersecurity. I want to take cybersecurity classes, but they're not offered in my undergraduate program. Or I want to take forensics courses, they're not offered in my undergraduate program. And you know, what I tell them is the most important thing is get the computer science or computer engineering degree. If you're interested in forensics, you're interested in security, research that on your own. But don't try and go, you know, across the grain during your undergraduate. If you just focus on the basics, the fundamentals, get the fundamentals down. And then once you get those fundamentals down, it's easier to branch out of those topics. And if you're really committed to going into one of those, you know, subfields, then, you know, go to graduate school or you know, pick up some certification training programs. There's plenty of those out there as well.
I'm assuming you want to maintain the good quality tech people that you have. How do you upskill those people?
It's one of those catch-22s, right? Because you know, you'll hear companies talk about this is, how do I get my folks better trained? Well, so you send them to school. Well, if I send them to school, they're going to leave. Well, if you don't send them to school, they're going to leave. So you're better off just taking that investment, investing in your people. And in fact, that's my approach has always been, you know, people first, tools later. Because if I don't have the people to do the job, then I can't run the tools. So I would rather invest the time and budget in my people, you know, and gain some loyalty and some runway with them, as well as some expertise. Anyone knows that that when you lose somebody from your team, it's going to be 6+ months before you fill it again. And are you going to be, I mean, the person you fill it with is not going to have any institutional knowledge. So invest in the folks you have. If they leave, you know, hey, at least you help that person become a better cyber operator. You help the program in general across the community. But I think people will find, odds are, if they invest in the people, they'll appreciate that and they'll stay because they'll have a better perception of the company and the job and their leadership.
Well, and we also, there's a labor shortage that's predicted to result in 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity positions by 2021. That's up from 1 million in 2014. So are there specific things you look for when recruiting? Would you rather have someone who's got some cyber knowledge or someone who's very, very eager to learn, or a combination of both?
Well, the combination of both is
the
the
utopia,
pinnacle,
right?
If you can find that, then that's fantastic. But given that there is this shortage, I mean, sure, if I find somebody that has the skills, that's somebody I would certainly want on my team. But you know, I'm willing to take on somebody that's eager to learn and wants to learn, because I know I don't have the folks that are going to do that, you know, waiting in the pipeline. So I'd much rather take somebody that's with, you know, very minimal cyber skills and a extreme eagerness to learn than somebody with mediocre cyber skills and doesn't really seem to want to grow that, you know, and I think most people probably would tell you the same thing. But having said that, what a lot of companies are doing are starting to invest in apprenticeships. And in order to do that, you really have to be kind of a bigger company, because the smaller companies don't get the bang for the buck for that. But they are able to partner with some of the community colleges and you know, different universities to help shape the program. And the benefit is you're shaping the program to the skills that match exactly what you want in your in your environment, and then you hire those people, so you already get a trained person that's trained in what you want them to do.
What do you think are the biggest challenges in securing IoT, and that includes BYOD, smart cities? What do you see the challenges for us being?
Well, so, the biggest challenge with IoT, well, there's lots of challenges with IoT. IoT devices, if you look at them from the basic sense of just simple sensors, they're designed primarily, with the function at hand to conserve computing power, limit the amount of resources to prevent battery drain. And so a lot of them weren't really designed with security in mind. And
Right.
so, then you got to think of how do you bolt on security on top of that, and most of it just isn't done, and then that becomes an attack vector. A lot of your attacks are, and a lot of your botnets are through IoT networks. And so even if I can try and control it in my own environment on how do we build secure IoT devices, everyone else across the whole industry that has those exposed IoT devices, and if you look at to go back to 2016, the Blueborn Bluetooth vulnerability, that impacted almost every Bluetooth device. And a lot of those IoT devices weren't able to be upgraded. They were designed, for a specific function, and designed to be inexpensive, so they didn't have the ability to upgrade the firmware. And so the best advice that industry experts were giving at the time was to those devices was, hey, turn them off when not in use. Well, first of all, that's terrible advice. But having said that, you can't turn off a pacemaker. You can't turn off an insulin pump. And so I think with especially IoT medical devices, you've got to have the ability to patch and upgrade firmware. And those are the things that they're terrifying to think about.
How do you consolidate that information to something that will help you secure these types of devices and your network in general? Is there a couple of tips?
Well, so I think the biggest tip I would give to that question is, everybody's doing DevOps, and you even start hearing SecDevOps. That's the latest buzzword, but really that is what it's all about. It's about bringing security people onto your scrums and your agile teams from the beginning, having them involved in all the planning meetings. That's a huge investment, of course, because then you have to have enough security people to not only defend your infrastructure, but also to participate in all the different planning meetings and coding sessions and design sessions. But if you build security from the ground up, you're going to have a more secure tool. Now, is it going to be perfectly secure? No, because technology will evolve, but that's why you build in the ability to upgrade and patch.
And maintain.
Mm-hmm.
So, cloud. What do you see the biggest challenges for companies in moving more of their apps and their assets onto the cloud?
In short, misconfiguration. And I was talking to a couple people at the conference here about that are cloud providers and cloud security experts, and they talk about here the biggest thing you hear in the news is this S3 bucket was unsecure and it leaked millions of records. Well, the S3 bucket at the beginning was very secure. Then the company tried to implement the bucket and started opening doors and didn't close the doors. If you're getting into the cloud, do you know how to utilize the tools? And if you don't, that's fine, because nobody expects you to be an expert in everything, but invest in the resources that do know, because there's a lot at risk. I mean, you can have a lot of gains from moving to the cloud. There's a lot of security gains, even though most people would probably disagree. There's a lot of security gains from going to the cloud, because they do this for a living. You do it part-time. So if I'm hosting everything locally, I'm devoting a portion of my resources. Well, security is one of their major components. So if you're leveraging everything that they have to offer, but you're not doing it in an educated way, then you're really putting yourself at risk. You got to just kind of go all in and realize that, hey, we may not be the expert in this. So we're going to have to, at least up front, invest heavily to make sure that we have the people that know what they're doing and that we can best secure our data. Because the short of it is everything's going to the cloud. And an investment in security is a hard thing to sell, because you're really investing in an insurance policy.
how do you secure funding and show that this is really the most important thing, that this funding needs to take precedence over something else?
Yeah, I think, to your early point in that, I think you'll find that most security people, lock their doors when they're at home. You'll see the one person in the neighborhood whose garage doors are down are probably your security person. Just by nature, we're paranoid and we trust no one. But having said that, I think you've got to come with, you can't just ask for everything because you're not going to get it. Every company's limited in the resources. So you have to do your risk calculus. Where are my biggest risk areas and where do I need to invest and what is the real threat? And also, what's the cost of the security mechanism you're putting in place as opposed to the cost if it's compromised? What you don't want to do is put more money into mitigating something than it would cost if it got exposed.
Right.
And so it's knowing your landscape, it's knowing where your pain points are, and knowing also you may find a vulnerability, but you may also realize that it's really not exploitable, at least not easily. And so it may not be worth investing a whole lot of money in patching it or mitigating if there's very low likelihood of it. Which is a painful thing to say, but when you're dealing with limited resources, you've got to put your money in smart places and your money and time, because both of those are equally scarce. And so it's really just doing that governance and that risk and compliance work and knowing where you need to head.
What advice would you give to CISOs that are kind of just starting in their career or just in general?
Know your technology is the biggest thing. I mean, that's one of the things I've always said, and I think it's done well for me through my military career, is you don't want your workforce to be smarter than you. Because one, you're going to have a hard time. You can be the best leader in the world, but if you don't understand the technology that your people are dealing with, it's hard to lead them. And it's also hard to tell your employees that if they're going the wrong direction, if you don't understand the direction they're going. And so I think you definitely have to have the management skills, but you've also got to have the technology skills.
Absolutely. So I have a fun question for you. So what is something that no one would know about you, or maybe some people, your close friends, would know, but a hobby, something that you like to really do in your downtime to sort of clear your head of all the security things that could happen?
Well, so as far as hobbies, I have 4 kids, so I have no time for hobbies.
That's a hobby.
but in all seriousness, I mean, it's fantastic. I can go home and get the reality check of hey, I need help with homework, or we need to make lunches, or we have a band concert to go to, and that's great. It's a great stress relief. It's a great break from just sitting on your waiting for the next email to come in, or dealing with the next crisis, or even making up crises to deal with.
How do you talk to your kids about security? Do you have monitoring systems in your house in place?
Yeah, so that's it's really a process of, and a lot of people treat this differently, but I've always been the approach of, hey, let the kids explore technology from as early as they're able to, just because the more comfortable they get with it, the more comfortable they'll be dealing with it throughout their lives. And so, but we also talk about good cyber hygiene, and in the home network, I have certain mechanisms in place to make sure that protect them from themselves. It's the same as we do in the workplace, and but I think really just get them exposed and teaching them the pitfalls and what not to do and what is okay to do, and that sort of thing is going to help them just be able to function better in a cyber-enabled world.
Is there anything else that you can think of that you really want for people to know? Like, what kind of keeps you worried? Like, what do you see as your biggest concern in how things are shaping right now within the security community?
I think automation is a huge area that we need to invest in, because regardless of if you have the appropriate workforce, you know, I would say good luck finding the people to fill the slots, right? You're never going to be able to be at full strength, even if you have unlimited personal resources. So understanding that, we need to look to automation. And you know, automation has come a long way, and people like to use the words AI and ML, and you know, different people have different feelings on how much automation is really AI and how much automation is really ML. But let's just call it automation and say that you know, computers are good at finding a needle in a haystack, right? Humans are good at finding a needle in a stack of needles. So let computers do what computers do best, and let humans do what humans do best. What we tend to find is when we don't do much automation, our folks get stuck dealing with the low-hanging fruit, and the more difficult things that, you know, computers can't do just end up sliding by.
Do you see that small businesses are at greater risk than the larger corporations, or how do you foresee the discrepancy?
So that's actually the trend. If you look at the statistics, is you know, smaller businesses are a bigger target than the larger businesses now, and it makes sense, because as a small business, you definitely don't have a security budget, and the adversary knows that, and that's, I think, kind of gets into a different issue, to take a slight tangent, into supply chain. And you know, I think you're seeing a trend in attacking small businesses and attacking supply chain. The adversary knows that the bigger companies are investing more heavily in security, and so they're going to be harder to get into. Notice I said harder and not impossible, because no one's impossible to get into. But,
That's right.
You know, the small businesses are going to have weaker security. Different links in the supply chain might have weaker security, and that's where the adversary is targeting. They're targeting the path of least resistance, and so small businesses have to invest in probably outsourced security, given that the fact that they're not going to be able to maintain the right security force themselves. But also, big companies need to consider who their vendors in their supply chain are, because a lot of those are potentially offshore. A lot of those are small companies, and if an adversary can compromise one of those systems, it gives them a pathway into the larger organization.
Security people have to know all the holes. The bad guys just have to find one.
That's right. Yep. That's the old adage of you know, defender has to be right every day. The attacker just has to be right once.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming down and joining us in this Ask the CISO series, sponsored by Fortinet. You were a great interview. It was really a lot of fun.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun, and thanks for inviting me.